Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 177, and it is by request from an alumni and friend, Martha. Now, before we get into Martha's question, tiny updates from my world. First of all, it's fucking freezing today. What the hell? It was 80 degrees a couple days ago, and I woke up in fear for all the new blossoms because it's azalea season right now, okay? So this is the time for flowers to be blooming and for me to be wearing less clothes, not more clothes. So I would like to complain to the manager, please, and thank you. What a load of shit. Anyway, so the winter continues to be wintering, but this is its last shuddering sigh, I'm convinced. I also wanted to shout out all of my alumni and friends who shared about the Audacity project last week during the public launch, and who have shared ever and at any time, because I never ever could have done this without help spreading the word. I am not famous enough for that. So I want you to know that even if I forgot to repost what you said, or if I didn't personally thank you, I see and I'm overwhelmed by the support every time I have launched this course, and that's the last time. So thank you for supporting me and for supporting your friends and recommending the project. It means a great deal to me, and I think next week perhaps I will finally answer the question of why am I closing it? I almost did that today, but I don't want to. Today's the first day of class. I don't want to talk about why it's ending. I want to lead it for, one last time. And so that's what I'm going to focus my energy on. I will get to that question eventually, I promise. So let's get to the question from Martha. So she sent me a voice note because she actually had a lot of questions and had been awarded a really nice residency, a paid residency, paid pretty well, that also included bringing a dramaturg of her choice in to the residency. And in circus, a lot of times it's called an outside eye, but from everything that I have experienced, both on the giving and receiving ends of they're the same thing. It is the same thing. But one has a very fancy word and the other one doesn't. So question one from Martha was working with an outside eye or a dramaturg, someone who's even perhaps outside of your primary discipline, but you're the leader. So now you're kind of in charge. And that feels weird. So how do you approach that? Let's talk about it. The very, very first thing that you should do is don't try to avoid the fact that you're in charge. You're totally in charge. You're the one calling the shots. This is your baby. This is your project. So anytime you invite someone outside of yourself to come into a project with you, we need to take possession of that experience and take possession of the process and know that, yes, you've asked for their help. It's also your job to set expectations to ensure that everyone is able to communicate openly and to get what they need. To that end, I think it's very important to have this conversation before you get into the project itself. And that conversation is asking for what you need. You must both be willing and able to ask for what you need. It is the only way that you're going to get it. And if your needs aren't met, it's not going to be a good experience. And it can end like quite horribly, actually. So let's not. I mean, ask me how I know. But to ask for what you need requires two things of you. One, you have to actually know what you need. And two, you have to believe that your needs are valid. If this sounds simple to you and you're like, yeah, of course my needs are valid, then move on. You don't need the spiel that comes next out of me. But for a large number of artists, particularly if you were socialized female, that means you were socialized to recognize that your needs were optional and less important than everyone else's. And I know that we all disagree with that intellectually, but guess what? It doesn't fucking matter intellectually if you understand something. When it's been trained into your meat from day one, it can be very difficult to shake. And the reason I'm harping on this so hard is that if you don't at least consider the possibility that your conditioning might still be at play, it will hijack your project. So even if you long ago rejected the notion that your needs were less important than other people's, and that you deserve to take up space and ask for what you need and have your needs met, even if you've already made peace with that, consider still how the inner gremlin saboteur might very cleverly get you to abandon yourself, to make things easier for other people, or not to seem like such a diva. So even though it sounds very simple to know what your needs are and to recognize them as valid and worthy of being met equally to everyone else, I wouldn't mention it if I hadn't seen it destroy projects many times. So let's just agree. You will ask for what you need, both of you. Now, being in charge means, yes, set the expectation that you can both ask for what you need and be open about your needs and wants and preferences with each other. Consider also that being the leader of the situation also denotes making sure that food is present or clean water. Is the room warm enough? If someone on the team has a light sensitivity, like how are we going to approach that? These are, parts of your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to necessarily buy everyone lunch every day. That's not what I mean. It just means the kind of person who forgets to eat really shouldn't be in charge without someone there to sort of like act as their second in command who doesn't forget to eat. And this happens more than you might think because, shockingly, people who devote their lives to physical skill sets like dance or circus arts have a long practice of ignoring signals from the body, such as pain or thirst or hunger. So just because someone has a long history and a lot of experience on stage does not necessarily mean they're going to make a great leader if they're out of touch with their own humanity. This is just something to keep in mind, okay? Just something to keep in mind. Like, if you get a chance to work with someone, you're like, oh my God, they're so amazing. They've done so many amazing things. I'm like, yes. And make sure that you get time to eat. Now, all this aside, it is so awesome to work with someone as an outside eye or a dramaturg, if you trust them, of course, and I think they have good taste. That's kind of necessary. But having worked most of my career without one, you end up being the choreographer, the performer, the director, the dramaturg, all of it. And it's a bit like being the butcher and the meat. And it's a lot to put on one person and on one brain. And the amount of times that I just wished there was someone else in the room with me. So amazing when this opportunity does arise. Definitely take full advantage of it and enjoy not being the butcher and the meat. Like, let them do their jobs. This is where being like too thoughtful can come into play. It's like if you're so focused on being a good leader in the situation that you don't actually like get to enjoy the fact that they are there to make your creative process easier and, well, not necessarily easier, but yeah, easier and more fulfilling and just richer. Like, they're there for you, which is part of the reason I'm harping so hard on asking for what you need, because if they also need to be, at a level of personal development where they recognize their own needs as valid, so that you don't have to constantly be guessing what they are, because nobody has time for that. We're trying to make some art here. So let's move on to Martha's second question, which is how to structure wild, free creation time like a residency. Because it's a bit like being dropped into the ocean. You're like, enjoy. You're like, okay. And you do want to feel that you've accomplished something at the end of each day, and you want to feel that you used the time well, and you don't want to be anxious the whole time, like, am I using the space? Am I using the time well enough? So creating some kind of structure for yourself. I thought this was a really good question from her. I know we've talked about it a little bit before, but let's go into it in a little bit more detail. So when you enter into a wild free creation time, I would strongly encourage the creation of a container around that time. Containers in both two senses, physical and temporal. In the space, we want a way to take possession of the space. I'll get into that more in a moment, but temporally, let's talk about that container first. Arguably the more important one sometimes, because I feel like getting an opportunity like a residency is so wonderful, and it's such a luxury and such a treasure, and you're like, I'm going to fill every moment of this time with incredible brilliance. Like, no, you're not. You're going to spend a lot of time sitting on the mats thinking or staring into space, just like you always do. That's okay. But more to the point, don't try to spend 8 hours a day creating. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. I'll give you the advice that Adam O'Keefe gave me when I went on my first writer sojourn. He's like, Strickland, don't spend 8 hours trying to write. Like, get up in the morning, have your coffee, then write for 2 to 3 hours, and then stop. Go outside, take a walk, go work out, take a nap, have lunch. You can come back and do another session from 1 to 3 hours in the afternoon. That advice saved my ass, so I'm giving it back to you. Thank you, O'Keefe. Well, whatever you think is going to work for you, but I would recommend 1 to 2 sort of sessions a day, not all day. And like, when you're in between sessions, just leave the space. When I was creating my first show with Natural Wings Aerial Dance in Perth in Western Australia, we had a space and we had 2 weeks to make the show. So we weren't creating in 8-hour chunks. There's the heat coming on. The heat. I know. What a travesty. Anyway, something that I loved about working with Dawn and Ruth was that, like, the Aussies have tea. They have tea. And we're like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, let's just get some things for tea. I'm like, what is that? You mean lunch? And they're like, no, lunch is different. Tea comes like later, and it's like a mini lunch. I'm like, sign me up, say less. And we would always take the time to leave the studio and go outside and like sit under a tree or something and have tea in between our creative sessions. And it was like really, I think that's where I learned the importance of leaving the room. Like, yeah, this is better. Okay, so now that's temporal, that's time, all right? And it's a little bit of space, but when talking about space, if you can create a small ritual to begin the day in this space, like maybe burn some incense, or maybe there's like a little settling the space song or short playlist that you can put on as you just like move around the room and start moving your body and moving things where you want to have them. Maybe you bring some fresh flowers and just something to give the space life at the beginning of each day. As well, at the end, as a closing ritual, I would highly recommend you sit with your dramaturg, if you can, or your outside eye, and come up with some questions. And this will be the sort of the bookend for your creative space. And I came up with this because Marta was saying she wanted to feel accomplished at the end of every day. Well, two ways of doing that. One, to set expectations that aren't like, I'm going to be brilliant for 8 hours today, but like, did you find something interesting today? And then put those into some questions. And you can answer them separately or together at the end of the day to sort of close out. And just some examples off the top of my head that I think could make good end of day closing questions are, I found this that was interesting to me today. This went nowhere for me today. I'm ready to let go of this. I would like to explore this more tomorrow, and that gives you something to come back to when you come back the next morning. It is hard to manage your own expectations, but like the first step to doing so is to recognize what they are and where they may or may not be very kind to you or your partner. But can we just take a second to consider how Martha asked this question in the beginning? I think it was really wise. She was like, I want to feel accomplished. That is your answer right there. Like, we're all pretty much at all times, in my opinion, chasing a feeling. Like, we want to feel a certain way. We say we want a certain outcome, but really we just want to feel a certain way. And the fact that she just like nailed it right at the beginning was amazing. Just something to keep in mind if you're having a hard time coming up with like goals to set. Like, well, ask yourself, how do you want to feel at the end of this? How do you want to feel during? And now, so Mark actually had more questions, but I've taken the entire time answering these two. So thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for your voice note and for reaching out for the Podlycast and giving me something juicy to dig into. Much appreciated, and do keep me posted on your kick-ass residency. If you have requests for future episodes, I would love to hear them. You can reach me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by my patrons. Thank you so much for standing with me and for your trust and allowing me to put things like this into the world with your support. It could not exist without you, not the way that it currently does. Thank you. Until next time, my friends, ask for what you need. And may you feel accomplished, and don't go back to sleep.